It seems to me that the British government ought to stand accused of incitement against the people of this country. A dictionary definition of incitement has it that it's the act of encouraging, persuading or pressuring someone to commit a crime, provoking unlawful behaviour, and that it can be a crime even if the intended act doesn't happen. The intended acts have not happened yet, not at scale, but only time will tell. I say the people of Britain have certainly been and are every day being deliberately pressurised by their government, certainly provoked. The policies that have been and are being enforced come not as the result of any democratic process. What the people are being expected to accept from the government without hope of redress is summary diktat. This assertion is proven more than by anything else by the removal of trial by jury, but I'll get to that. Communities the length and breadth of Britain have been altered beyond recognition from the point of view of the indigenous populations that lived in them for 1,000 years and more. New people have been placed in communities in such numbers and at such a pace, and with full access to the benefits earned and paid for by the benighted taxpayers, that the original faces and cultural identities of those communities are altered beyond recognition and forever. No one was consulted about this fundamental existential change. Rather, it was simply foisted on people with no means of challenging what was happening. The cost of living has been made unreachable for ever-increasing numbers of decent, hard-working people. This fact is undeniable. British people pay among the very highest amounts of their hard-earned money for the energy by which to live of any population on earth. These costs are less the result of external forces and by far and away the consequence of ideologically driven policies that are themselves punitive by design. There's nothing more important than keeping your money and your identity safe online. With so many VPN options available, choosing the right one can be pretty daunting. This video's sponsor, ExpressVPN, is making the choice easier for GB News viewers. And with their new winter sale, ExpressVPN is offering a huge saving of up to 80% off if you act now. Plus an extra 4 months free. Click the link now or scan the QR code to claim. Energy Secretary Ed Miliband pushes ruinous policies in pursuit of the fantasy of net zero that is at the heart of Agenda 2030, which is itself a dream driven not by any demonstrable reality or practical need, but by ideology. Ancient freedom is being set aside. Freedom of speech is not defended by the government, but on the contrary, is treated as an obstacle to the pursuit of the aforementioned policies. People are jailed for things they say in the street and publish online. This truth is widely reported and its implications widely understood by more and more citizens every day. I say this is policy, making it more of a crime to say or write something deemed offensive than is sexual violence against children, is primo facie incitement and provocation of people who answer first and foremost as decent people do, not to ideologically driven policy and legislation, but to their own consciences. People know right from wrong and are provoked when they see wrong done, especially in their names and by the state. People are also provoked and pressurised by the tension resultant from being told they live in a democracy while simultaneously experiencing what it is to have the power to govern themselves ripped from their hands by that state. For people meaningfully to govern themselves, which is the textbook definition of democracy, they must have the final say over the legitimacy or not of any legislation under which they are expected to live. For 8 centuries in this country of Britain, that power has been manifest in one thing and one thing only, and that's trial by jury. An independent jury, operating under the original terms of trial by jury, judges not just the guilt or innocence of the accused, but also, and more importantly, the justice of the legislation under which the accused was brought before them in the first place. The guilt or innocence of the accused is supposed to be determined by a jury of his or her peers who've heard evidence and then make their individual and independent decisions guided only by their own consciences. Soon the only alternative will be to plead not guilty and then face the unilateral decision of guilt or innocence made by an employee of the state that created the legislation in the first place. By any metric, this is the textbook definition of tyranny. People living under tyranny are certainly pressurised by having no recourse to the law in any meaningful sense. The same people watch every day as their so-called government pushes for war with Russia I read today that Prime Minister Keir Starmer has pledged to back Denmark in the face of US President Donald Trump's statements of intent to take control, if not ownership, of the Danish territory of Greenland. This would surely mean Britain was contemplating war, not just with Russia, but with the United States of America as well. I say such a prospect for people of fighting age and also the parents of those people of fighting age to be made to contemplate donning uniforms and being marched off to war from a country they have been taught to despise as the product of imperialism, racism and colonialism is provocative and pressurising, to put it mildly. Again, I say this is deliberate incitement. I also say the government is pursuing policies designed to provoke civil unrest and violent action from its own people. People left with nothing more to lose, are made desperate by definition. I say increasing numbers of people, those who have otherwise spent their lives abiding by the law, paying their taxes, contributing to their communities in ways great and small, are being deliberately stripped of all they have valued, even the very necessities of life, with the intent that they will, in hopeless desperation, lash out at something or someone. Britain now is a pressure cooker environment, increasingly inimical to everyday life, deliberately inflammatory legislation and policies, iniquitous judgment by courts, state propaganda shaped to stoke fear and division on religious as well as on political grounds, taxes deliberately designed and imposed so as to make it impossible for working people to retain for themselves, far less for their children, the fruits of hard work. We already hear about one farmer after another taking their own lives in the face of inheritance taxes that will ruin them and their families, drive them from land they've cared for through generations. Talk about incitement. Most recently, there's the news of the further erosion of privacy. Ofcom empowered to read messages their owners wanted to encrypt and so keep from prying eyes. All of these measures are, I say, intended to infuriate and enrage, to leave decent people cornered and watched like creatures on a microscope slide. What the people of Britain are enduring now, and I do mean enduring, is not governance. I say Starmer is a cowardly individual by nature. That wide-eyed countenance as he seeks to defend his government's indefensible actions is that of an animal caught in the full beam of the headlights of an oncoming vehicle on the road at night. But of course, he is safe enough from consequences, cowering between the legs of his close-quarter protection detail at the heart of the Westminster bubble, so completely insulated from the practical and emotional effects of his government's misdeeds. I say it is others who will bear the consequences of his government's incitement and provocation. Apart from anything else, and there's much else to say, a government acting in this way is unforgivably and inexcusably reckless. I say it's beyond reckless, calculated rather. Some of us are old enough to have learned the words of the elders, those who went before us and saw the same events unfold in their own time and place, that might be summarised by the notion that evil thrives when good people do nothing. I learned this at school, among other places, and so I would directly challenge any suggestion that to repeat such sentiment now is provocative or incitement on my part. On the contrary, I would say reading anew the words of those we were once raised to admire is no more than the necessary reminder of the primacy of right in the face of wrong. Who has not heard it said that when tyranny becomes law, rebellion becomes duty? That's Thomas Jefferson, broadly regarded, I think I'm safe in saying, as someone whose words are worth attending in the present just as they were in the past. Jefferson had on his personal seal the words, "Resistance to tyrants is obedience to God," a thought worth remembering in the face of British Justice Secretary David Lammy's claim that it was his Christian faith that inspired him to seek to do away with trial by jury, which, as I have said, is the individual's last and only defence against tyranny. I'm leaning on the words of Americans, but only because the same threats to freedom prevail in that country too. Jefferson also wrote that when a government is tyrannical, the people must know that it is their duty, it is their right to throw off such government. It wasn't just Jefferson, of course. John Hancock, he of the biggest and most obvious signature on the Declaration of Independence, had it that resistance to tyranny becomes the Christian and social duty of each individual. The insistence on right unalienable right hardly began with the American Declaration of Independence or its Constitution and Bill of Rights. The ideas therein were already ancient then, ancient because they are timeless, which is to say they have no beginning and no end. Right doesn't start. Right is just right. In ancient Greece, the philosopher Plato said, "The price good men pay for indifference to public affairs is to be ruled by evil men." Those feeling pushed beyond endurance, even beyond hope, should know that they are feeling this way not by accident but by design. I say they are being deliberately pushed towards unlawful behaviour by a government fumbling towards the last resort. It is a crime to incite unlawful behaviour. But I say that right now, in 2026, it's our so-called government that is guilty. If people are hurt, and the way things are going, people surely will be hurt one way or another, then it will be the fault, indeed I say the intention, of those now wielding all the power. If you've enjoyed this content, don't forget to click and subscribe, and if you haven't already done so, go to the App Store and download the GB News app.